Can you hear me well?
And we are live. We are live. We are live. We are live. I mean, my dance moves should change. I do this a lot. I should do something else. I don't know what I should do. I think I'll wait for T because she's in Kampala to come back with the Ugandan's national dance to teach me so that every time when I'm live, I should just do that dance. But anyway, we are live on our Popin's Facebook page. Good afternoon to you and yours. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday. Coming to you live on our Popin's Facebook page and also on our YouTube channel for our Popin's. My name is Viankosi. And recall this, it's a rep. And today, second time visitor to the platform all the way. It's a good morning for him, but a good afternoon to us. His name is Melusi Simelane, joining me all the way from New York. Is my guest today, joining us for the next 30 minutes or so. And talk about all LGBTQI things that are concerning everybody actually in the world. So I cannot wait for that conversation. I invite you to be part of that conversation. You can simply leave your comment section on the comment, or rather your comments on the comment section below, and find us on other social media platforms. It is at in_health on Twitter, and it is at pop in on, or rather at pop in on Instagram. And we're also on YouTube. You can catch this conversation at your convenience, man. Our YouTube channel, it is at Oram Pop In. Follow us on TikTok as well. It is at Oram Pop In with the hashtag It's a Rap, and www.popin.org gets you there behind the scenes. Like I said, my name is Viankosi. You can tag myself as well. It is at Viankosi. Today, well, first and foremost, Melusi, good morning to you on your side, but it is a good afternoon from us here in South Africa. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Good afternoon to everyone in Southern Africa and across the continent, and good morning to anyone who might be watching in New York. And thank you for
Yes.
having me.
We cannot wait to get. Thank you so much for honoring the invite yet again. For being our guest this afternoon. We appreciate it. We know that you had to wake up early on that part of the world, but we are really appreciated. Just to give our viewers a gist of who you are. Melusi Simelane holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree in marketing from the University of Eswatini. This was completed in 2021, fairly new, and now is currently still at the Obama Foundation's scholar program at Columbia University in New York, and that's where he is right now in New York City. Having been selected by the U.S. State Department to participate in the International Visitors Leadership program in 2017, Melusi continues to advocate for marginalized communities, acceptance and legal rights, and build build intersectional human rights coalition to empower young leaders and activists across Southern Africa. Melusi Simelane was the founding director of Eswatini Sexual and Gender Minorities, and the country's first membership-based LGBTQI+ organization, which aims to increase awareness of social and systematic inclusion of LGBTQI+ citizens. He led the realization of the country's first LGBTQI Pride in 2018, and is celebrated worldwide. Melusi's work aims to position the day-to-day human experience as a center part of broader justice and international human rights movement in the Southern Africa. Melusi, once again, thank you so much for your time. How is New York? We just spoke, you and I, briefly behind the scenes. I was like, how's New York? And you're like, imagine Johannesburg. So, but how's the
CBD.
weather? How's the weather? How are people treating you there?
It's amazing, man. It's like
Yeah.
it's the concrete jungle. If you can make it in New
Mm-hmm.
York, you can make it anywhere. It's
Anyway.
fast
Yeah.
paced. It's a city that never
Yeah.
sleeps. It's springtime, so that means finally I can rock my shorts and just walk down the park. It's really beautiful. Everyone minds their business. It's so fast paced. It's like
Mm-hmm.
every time I think about going back home, I'm like, I think everything is gonna be so slow for me because of the fast-paced
Right.
life of
Because
New York City.
yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it is what it is. You're here to learn, and it's about taking the culture here and taking it back home as
Mm-hmm.
much as bringing the culture from home here, because that's the beauty
Yeah.
of such cities. Like it's a mixture of different cultures and different people, and I love it.
I've got you. I envy you when you say it's springtime that side because you're about to
Yes.
experience winter right here in the south. And I'm like, I'm not having it. I envy you that you'll be rocking it, not talking about in the park, but nonetheless, that's a
Right.
conversation for another day. Let's start it here. Headlines, man. We are, as the LGBTQ plus community, we are, part of the headlines. I mean, I think a lot of our stories make it to the headlines. The first one is President Ramaphosa was, lauding South Africans' LGBTQ plus rights on Freedom Day. I don't know if you had the courtesy of seeing this headline. To yet another with yet another queer person being murdered in a suspected hate crime in Durban. And well, my question is, it was done in Freedom Day or just after President's speech, then that headline came out. And I'm like, freedom continues to not be free for us.
Right, right, and it reminds me of that very old TV ad
Yeah,
on the South African channels. Are you free or are you dominant? But
yeah.
it also speaks to how important it is that we need to move away from just words and lip service from our governments, not just
Mhm,
particularly South African governments, but our governments
mhm,
across the region and across the continent, right? Because I always think of people saying, well, at least President Ramaphosa supports queer rights, but it's more than just that. It doesn't matter what President Ramaphosa supports or doesn't support. It's about the community at grassroots level. It's about the policies. It's about the laws in place. It's about the systems in place. People always argue that we in South Africa, I always say we because I work in South Africa, though remotely. But people always argue that South Africa has the most beautiful constitution. But the question is the implementation in place? Is the policy environment enabling for people to be able to implement such policies if they exist or such legislation if they exist? And the truth of the matter is, it's not an enabling environment because as a queer person, if I'm sexually assaulted, if I'm harassed, if anything, there are no clear steps or stages for me to go through so that I'm protected. I go to the police station, it's a runaround. I go to perhaps a hospital, it's a runaround because I'm queer. And I think the conversation should not just be at presidential level, but it should actually be at grassroots level. What are we doing to create a safe space for people to be free to be who they are without being punished or without being ostracized?
mhm. Most definitely. I still think though that you touch on the constitution, and for me, our constitution, especially the African constitutions in different countries,
Mm,
remain a black and white issue. A black and white in terms of paper, a pen, words on paper, in that context. But it doesn't filter down to the men on the ground, the grassroots level, sort of like approach that you're talking about. It only remains just a paper that makes for a good reading, that puts a country, out there with other countries that have a beautiful constitution. But when it comes to actually impacting the people that it's supposed to, it's not the case. So I agree with you there. Let's talk about then the USA, with USA abortion rights repeal, and is the same-sex rights next, because that's actually how the title read on the headline. And my question was, what are the chances that the same-sex marriage is next? Look at how that sort of like right to abort has come about to be repealed, and you look at the kind of, I don't know, I want to say, work that the US has put in gay rights, in same-sex marriages, in order to I want to say, to protect also, it being a black and white or paper, beautiful to read kind of a situation. How is the same-sex rights, what are the chances that it would be next?
so that's the whole conversation that people are having in the United States right now. The whole thing about if the Supreme Court, because remember this was just a leak of a majority judge, I mean a majority opinion by the Supreme Court to want to sort of overturn the Roe versus Wade precedent of the Supreme Court, and the question that a lot of people are asking that if they are able to overrule this Supreme Court judgment in the United States, what does that mean for all of the other freedoms and liberties that have been won through the courts? Because if you look at history, not just the USA, but historically around the world, yes, there has been constitutions like the South African Constitution, which has been able to protect queer or marginalized people from the onset. But there are some countries in which you have had to go through the courts to make sure that marginalized groups are protected. Look at Botswana, for instance. Look at Angola, for instance. Mozambique, and a lot of other, small countries in the region that are starting to decriminalize, that are starting to look into the protection of queer or marginalized persons. But now, if you have the highest, the apex court of the land wanting to roll back the time on that. It says a lot because it enables states to want to sort of roll back, number one, safe abortion for women, forgetting that the issue of abortion is about the woman and her body and her child, isn't it? And if the courts start looking at it that way, that the state has the power to dictate what happens to a body, what happens indeed to the 2016 same-sex marriage court ruling, right? Because we do not know what they are going to do next. And that is exactly what the Biden administration is trying to look at right now, to codify the Roe and Wade judgment. Because and I think it's a lesson for us in Africa, isn't it? It's a lesson to say, once you have a beautiful judgment in court that protects human rights, then the legislation must act quickly to codify that into law, so that it's not just easy to turn it back. Because we know that, of course, laws can be changed over time, but we need it codified in statutory books, so that we are able to be protected. And yes, it can be argued that, I mean, we do have the protections in South Africa, and like you and I have agreed, it's all black and white. But once it's codified, once it's in law, and people are empowered enough, and for a country like the United States, which is very litigious, and that speaks to how empowered the community is in this country, to know their rights, and to know how the law works, and to be able to sort of take up matters in their own hands and go through the courts. It means that once we are able to empower our communities in Africa as well, we might be able to protect ourselves with the laws and with the constitutions that exist.
Most definitely. If you just joined us, welcome to it, man. I'm speaking to one of the greats, Melusi. I, yeah, I wanted to say more, but I'll just say the greats, because people will come at me and say, yeah, and also and then, we'll be here praising you. But he's done amazing work in the LGBTQ plus spaces. His name is Melusi. Simelane is currently in the USA, in New York. I invite you to leave your comments in the comment section. And when I look at it, so good, it says like, keep up with the good work, Melusi. Somebody comes here on YouTube and says, amazing, pop in. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. My screen I'm seeing a lot of love emojis, going about my screen, and I think it's just for you, Melusi, because everybody here knows me, and every time when there's a guest like you, the love goes, you take the love, and I'm left here
Yes,
loveless.
yes,
Anyway,
yes, so
yeah,
kind.
yeah. Continue to do so. Melusi, let's talk about now the I don't know how to say it, Ilga or Ilga. I think that's the right word. ILGA 2022 Ilga, right? I'm saying it right, because I didn't know how to pronounce
Yes,
it.
it's
Yeah.
Ilga.
So 2020 Ilga 2022. There was that announcement, an amazing announcement that I think it's so. I mean, it's game changing for the southern part of Africa, because we sort of like, we wanted it. I think the last time that it happened in Johannesburg, it was in 1990 or 1999. I'm not quite sure of my years. But then in 2022, then it was announced that in 2024 it's coming here. Tell us about the ELEC 2022.
I mean, it's so beautiful, right? This was my first ILGA World Conference. I've always attended the regional. I mean, I'm sure you know what ILGA is. ILGA is the International Lesbian and Gay Association. It's sort of a membership group where LGBT organizations across the world, they subscribe and become members. So there's, for instance, Pan African ILGA. There's ILGA Asia, there's ILGA Europe, there's ILGA North America. So the organization that I founded is a member of the Pan-African ILGA, which then subsequently means that we're part of the broader. So I've attended the Pan-African ILGA conferences in the region, but I'd never attended the world one. And what a beautiful time for me to attend, when I'm now, taking a step back from the queer work, because I'm now focusing more on other human rights issues, like your freedom of association, freedom of expression, right to information. But in any case, it was beautiful to attend. And the theme this year was LGBTIQ youth, future, present, change. And it was amazing to see beautiful persons coming from all over the globe. And a part of the ILGA World Conference is, yes, discussing prevalent issues, like, of course, the Roe and Wade judgment leak by the Supreme Court, and of course the developments that are happening all over the world in the queer space, and how everything interlinks and how everything overlaps, so that we are able to work together. But over and above that, then what happens is that as members, we come together and discuss the constitution of Ilga, discuss the sub-constitutions in the region, because we do regional caucuses, and then we also come together as a General Assembly. And the final thing that we do, over and above voting for the next board, if the board that exists, that their term expires, is then vote for the next host. It was so beautiful to see. There were bids from Belgium. Belgium was bidding to host. Argentina was also bidding to host. And of course, our beautiful partners from Iranti and Gender Dynamics. I don't know if you know Iranti, they're based in Johannesburg, and Gender Dynamics is based in Cape Town. They were leading the bid for South Africa to host. And what a beautiful, beautiful thing to witness. Everybody, reckoning that it has not been in Africa for so long, and everybody reckoning that, look, Africa needs the moment, and the African movement has done so much without much world recognition. And as someone who's worked in the movement in Africa, I know how hard we work and how hard it is for us to gain international recognition, right? So we were able to mobilize and canvass the membership across the world, so much to the point where even the bidders from Belgium and the bidders from Argentina said on the last day of the campaigning, and when we were supposed to vote, they were like, look, we want to host, but we also wanted to go to Africa. So everyone was just like,
Yeah.
elated. Everyone was so excited. But to your question about Africa, South Africa being ready, Cape Town being ready, I mean, I've got my own reservations about why it would go to Cape Town. I mean, you and I know the whole racial thing about Cape Town, but it's about looking beyond that, because at some point, yes, we cannot compromise on racial, politics as they exist, and the inequality as it exists in our country and in the world as a whole. But it's about then looking beyond that. If we are going to bring such a huge conference, which can host up to about 2,000 people in one go, and say, who has the capacity to do this, and who can actually execute it and make sure that we are able to, number one, sell Africa to the world, but then of course sell South Africa to the world. So I mean, Iranti and Gender Dynamics decided that Cape Town is the right place. And of course, all we can do as African members and African activists and as African queer people is to say, look, we are behind Gender Dynamics and we are behind Iranti, and this is a moment for us as Africans to show up in our numbers. Even if we do not make the list to be at the conference, at least we can be on the sidelines, to see this beautiful convening of queer persons from across the world, the highest sort of decision making body for queer persons in the world, I think Ilga is. So there we have it.
Yeah. We cannot wait for 2024 because, like you said, we are definitely what we have to congratulate also Iranti and Gender Dynamics for bidding and actually getting the bid to host the ILGA conference. And it what it does, like you're saying, we need to look beyond some of these small issues and say, let us rally behind the conference and to make sure that it is happening. It's happening in Cape Town in 2024. And I cannot wait, because also what it does is it puts something to the lines that what you said. It puts Africa in the map and says, we've been doing all these things by ourselves. Look at what else we can do well when it comes to LGBTQI+. And what it does, with the current, I want to say, host or continent that is Africa, it being the host, and it says African countries, look, it's possible, and maybe change tune to some of these African countries necessarily supporting the LGBTQI+. So most definitely it's better. So I cannot wait for it. I look forward to it. I just it's one of those exciting things. And when I saw that you were actually part of it, I was like, oh, okay. At least now, that's you see where the grade then comes in. I'm like, oh, Melusi was there. Who else was there? And then so other people were there. So it's quite amazing. So we'll definitely be there in 2024 for the ILGA conference. I wanted to say it's happening in Cape Town, but what also the conference? What does it do? What does it? that will attend and be there, especially organizations that will be attending and representatives that will be attending. What could it mean, or what should it mean to them, or what kind of impact will this conference have on them?
Wow, what a big question. I feel like this is a question that the Ilga representatives would have to answer in terms of what do they bring to the table for the membership. Because
Yeah.
I think the first thing that I would say is that I encourage LGBTQ organizations, queer-led organizations across the continent, across the world,
Yeah.
to make sure that they are members of ILGA in their respective regions. And for us, we do have the Pan-African ILGA, which is based in Johannesburg. Because once you become a member, then you are able to sort of tap in to the power of the collective voice and into the power of shared skills. And, there's so much power in coming together to do things. So that's one thing that I've always believed in. Like, we cannot achieve anything if we're on our own. So the beautiful thing about ILGA is that we are able to work together. I mean, of course, we've got different priorities, but once we come together at ILGA level, whether it's at regional, Pan Africa, or at world, we are able to bring our priorities together and say, how do we move the conversation forward? So, what I think the conference being in Cape Town in 2024 will do for us as African activists is, number one, showcase our wins, because for so long, and here comes the conversation of decolonization, isn't it? But I mean, we have to have those difficult conversations, and I think it's important that we start showcasing our own African wins that have come to be using African motivated strategies, because not everything has been done using the Eurocentric way or the Western way in this advocacy. And we have done so much as an African continent, and we need to shed the light on that. That's number one. But over and above that, personally, I think it's about also empowering the nascent organizations and the nascent activists from across the continent to say, look, you are not alone, and say, look, your work matters. Even if you are working in your community, even if you are working in your neighborhood, it's about acknowledging and actually being able to see yourself in such a world stage. And once the world stage comes to your backyard, it's like, boom, whoa, man. So it's about empowering the queer voices and empowering not just activists, but queer persons who might be in the closet, who might be afraid of coming out, to say, look, you're not alone. The whole world is grappling with a myriad of issues. And once it comes to your backyard, you are able to tap into that and be able to see yourself through that. And I think it would be great for us.
Activist, and just so many other things. Melusi Simelane is my guest this afternoon, and we just touched on ILGA 2022 to ILGA 2024, which is the conference that will be taking place in South Africa, Cape Town. We cannot wait for that. We just have to give kudos to Gender Dynamics and Iranti for bidding and actually getting the bid for the ILGA 2024 to come and be hosted in Africa. And while it's a wrap, and many other features that you see on Oron Public's page, they are produced by one amazing guy, Happy Paleng. He's the one that makes us speak to amazing people such as Melusi and many others. And well, my name is Viankosi, and I'm your should I say face, or the host. I'm the one that is talking to the people who are doing amazing things like Melusi. And you can leave your comments at the comment section. If you have a question for Melusi, I invite you to do so on Twitter. We are at @n_health, and you can simply hashtag it's a wrap. Melusi, I see the comments are coming in about ILGA, but before I get to that, I want us to touch on the High Court Eswatini judgment. Excuse the bus, I'm working from home. And I live like across the street. Just by the street. I want us to talk about the High Court, Eswatini judgment, and talk about, and I know the first conversation that you and I had that established this relationship, it was based on that, on saying, where are you guys, as Eswatini sexual and gender minorities, and what is it that you have done so far? And I remember that our first conversation was on that, and how eager you were to say, you know what, we are not giving up. We have to, because it's not only about recognition, but I think it's about acknowledgement and bringing in the change that is way overdue in Eswatini. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what was the initial case, just to remind other people that we're not part of the conversation. But what was the initial case for ESGM?
Thank you so much for that. For the background, I think it's important to remember that there is the criminalization of same-sex, consensual same-sex acts in Eswatini. So what that means is that there's this assumed criminality for anyone who's queer, right? Because as you know, not many people have a clear understanding of how the law works and stuff like that. So when we tried to register our organization, Eswatini Sexual and Gender Minorities, back in 2019, the government did not allow us to register first as an LGBTQ based organization, but second, as an organization that seeks to promote and lobby and advocate for LGBTQ issues for obvious reasons, right? The criminalization, the morality question, the church, the the beeswax. So we took that matter to court with the support of the Southern Africa Litigation Center, because we our understanding and our main argument was that, look, you might think that we are criminals, but there's nothing in law that says we're criminals. The only thing that's criminal in this country is the same-sex acts. Basically, it's what happens in the bedroom. So you cannot then assume that I'm a criminal just by walking down the street when you don't know if I do commit the crime in the bedroom. So we were arguing that it's freedom of association, it's freedom of expression, and it's freedom of assembly. So that's all we want. We want to be registered as an organization because the Constitution entitles everyone to that right. So the matter had been in court for over 18 months, and then fortunately, the judgment came out some 2, 3 weeks ago. And it was the most confusing judgment ever. But
No, right?
yeah,
I went through. I was like, I go.
I
Really?
know, I
Right.
know, but I suppose in a political climate like Eswatini, such things do not surprise you, right? Because on the one hand, you appreciate, number one, I personally appreciate the dissenting judgment because it was a constitutional bench, so there was a dissenting judgment and then a majority judgment. So number one, I appreciate the dissenting judgment because it's very sober, it's very clear. It speaks to the technicalities of what happened. It speaks to the rules of the courts about how constitutional matters should be heard in the future. But over and above everything, it speaks, the dissenting judgment, it speaks to how the registrar of companies, which is the body responsible to register as an organization, did not follow due procedure as provided in the Companies Act.
Yep.
Something that the majority judgment failed to recognize, and something that
Yep.
we were actually talking about. Because in our case, we were not talking about the criminalization. We were not talking about whether it's wrong to be gay or right to be gay. We were talking about our right to freedom of association and our right to freedom of assembly as citizens of Eswatini. Forget about
Yep.
the fact that we happen to be queer, right? So then going into the majority judgment, first of all, it asserts our rights, it affirms our rights. It's like, of course, you're citizens in this country. It doesn't matter whether you are,
Yeah.
they call it sexual preference, which,
Difference.
some of us are not happy with the term preference, but you can
You
forgive
know
the
what?
courts. But you can forgive the courts, because they use language that comes to them at that particular moment, right? And it's about
Yeah.
learning. We're always learning, and that's okay. But for me, because I'm not going to speak on behalf of people, I'm just going to speak for me reading this, and as a queer person from Eswatini, it's like, how do you, under the same breath, affirm my rights and say, I deserve all these rights? They are inherent by the mere fact that I'm born and I'm a Swati, and it's in line with international law, it's in line with our constitution. And then, before you even swallow your breath, you say, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we cannot allow you
Yeah.
to register as an organization. It's bizarre, but like I said, in the current political climax, I'm particularly not surprised because it says to me, is this something that would be in a more enabling political environment? What I mean is that in a democratic society, is this the judgment that we would be reading? I do not
Yeah.
know. I cannot cast aspersion on our courts. I respect them so much, but I'm just putting that question out there to say, in the
Yeah.
current political climate, you know,
Yeah, I feel as if we need to engage the courts robustly as the
yeah,
LGBTQ plus, and we need to sort of like take them to book and say, yeah, well, like you say, I was when I was reading to it, I was like, oh, okay, great, great, great. but that huge but to say, yeah, we're giving you this, but at the same time, in the same breath, we're taking it away from you.
Yeah.
I say it was a missed opportunity, Melusi, for the court, for the High Court of Eswatini to teach, first to teach and to be taught. Second, to make history as one of the countries that would, pass such a judgment and say to the neighboring states, look at us, we're inclusive, look at us, we are, we are accepting, we are acknowledging, and I think they missed the mark, truth be told. But I wanted to then ask you, how does that decision of the Eswatini High Court affect you guys as an organization, right? And then outside that, the LGBTQI persons that are in various communities in Eswatini.
Right. I think to answer your question, it goes to what you just opened with in this conversation about engaging the courts robustly, but not just the courts and the entire judicial system, but engaging the policymakers, engaging the civil servants, because they become the administrators in terms of decisions that need to be made and the implementation of whatever is a statutory obligation, but also engaging communities. I think this judgment sort of gives us an opportunity to go back to the community and say, oh, well, they might have refused this registration, but they did say that we have human rights which are inherent. I mean, just this morning when I woke up, it's afternoon for you, I found a text from a friend who took a screenshot of a newspaper clipping. So apparently, the Human Rights Commission in the country released a statement. It's just I haven't read it, but it speaks to how the High Court judgment sort of affirms our rights. And I'm sure the Human Rights Commission is actually agreeing that our human rights are inherent. It doesn't matter whether you are a convicted felon, whether you are whatnot. By the mere fact that you're a citizen of this country, you have the rights as enshrined in the Constitution, in line with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in line with the African Charter, in line with the SADC Convention, the Geneva Conventions, and whatever international instrument. However, what it does, this judgment for us as a queer community, is it sort of hurts and it demoralizes us, right? Because on the other side, it does empower us to keep on working, keep on engaging robustly into debates, policy briefs, and stuff like that. But it also demoralizes and it hurts because it reminds us constantly that our lives as marginalized persons, as queer persons, because it's the same for every marginalized community, it reminds us that our lives are not in our hands, but our lives are in the hands of those with power. And once we have the conversation about power, it becomes a painful one, because that is when then the question of intersectionality must come to play, because that is when women must come and join us. That is when people with disabilities must come and join us. That is when the different marginalized communities must come together and start reckoning with the whole conversation of power. That is when racial minorities like Black communities must come into play and start having that conversation about power. It's an unfortunate and painful conversation to have, but such a judgment reminds you constantly that you do not have power as a marginalized person, and you always have to fight for your right, something that the courts themselves agree is inherent.
It's quite interesting. I definitely agree with you on that point. And I wanted to ask, I don't know what else is there to be done, but I want to I welcome your point on this, or your view on what can be done lawfully so. And I know it's the highest court in the land. I know it's the highest court in the land, but what is it that can be done with what is currently being faced by the LGBTQI plus persons in Eswatini right now, lawfully, right? To say robustly, let's engage. Second to that, let's change the I want to say the narrative that is of the LGBTQI plus persons who live there, that you're saying, yes, my rights are inherent, or the Constitution protects me, blah, 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 blah. But actually, in reality, this is what also you're saying. It's like you're celebrating me on one hand, but also throwing egg yolk on my face. So how do we lawfully so engage and come out? I guess I don't want to say 50-50, but come out with the courts haven't protected and made sure that the Constitution was exercised, and also us as people that are living in the country having to experience that and say, actually, the courts have our backs. But while we sort of think of that question, I want us to quickly go through the comment section very quickly. Happy Paleng comes through and says, we are so excited about 2024 and it's definitely and it's definitely going to be a game changer. Super proud of Jabulani Chen can't read this. Pereira, Liberty Matthias, Iranti, and Gender Dynamics. Those are the people that were in the forefront of bidding. That one also comes back and say, Cape Town, definitely we are there. I hope, Happy, that you and I will be also be part of that. Pahle Magola says, Ilga coming to RSA is so important and puts the voice to our open-minded constitution to the continent and the world, and gives us a round of applause. Luyanda Mzimela says, great work, Melusi, and sending you all types of hugs, or rather hearts. Nkosenya Ndlovu says, keep it up, guys. Sinani. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Let's see if you, okay, no, I think this one you've sort of like touched, especially when you speak about Ilga. So we'll not go back to that. Let's go to that question that I've asked you just before we read the comments. How do you do it? How do we change it?
Thank you so much for the love on the comments, and we're doing this together. We're doing this for all of us. We're a family. So one thing I must correct is that in Eswatini, it's not the apex court. I know that whenever we say constitutional court, it sounds like it's the apex, but actually it was the high court. So I mean, I'm not a legal scholar, even though I work a lot with legal persons. But the best I can explain this is that the apex court in Eswatini is the Supreme Court. So this was a high court matter, but because it was a constitutional challenge, how the courts operate in Eswatini is that if it's a constitutional matter that is being challenged, then the matter cannot just be a high court matter, because if it's just a high court matter, then it's just one judge. Then it must be referred to the Chief Justice, who must constitute a bench of 3 judges to hear the matter. But it still remains a high court matter. It's just that it then has a bench of 3 judges because it's a serious constitutional challenge. What I mean by that is that it can be appealed if our queer activists in Eswatini decide to do that. Because I'm in New York, I cannot speak for the queer community in Eswatini. I don't know what they're going to decide about this. But basically, because it's a high court matter, it can be challenged, and it can be challenged, appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, which then is our apex equivalent to the South African Constitutional Court. So in terms of the legal route, of course, it can be challenged, it can be appealed. So there have been many conversations. I know the friends here in New York who have asked me, are you folks considering then doing away with this case and just going back to the registrar of companies and lodging another, sort of attempt to register? And I was like, that's fun. That would be really fun to go back to the men that said no and say, can you try us now that the High Court has dismissed us? But no opinion is wrong, and no sort of strategy is wrong. It depends what the community also decides to do. So I don't know. But then on the other hand, I'm always a believer of not just doing it at high level, but also doing it at grassroots level. I'm happy to litigate. I'm happy to lobby governments, and I've sat in very high positions. Not sat, but sort of engaged governments at high level. But that is not something that I'm always like a chip on the shoulder for me, because it for me personally, especially in our political climate, that does not really do much. What does much is working the community on the ground. Litigation is great. Litigation is great because it speaks to the law as it were, but the ground needs to be touched, and that speaks to advocacy. We need to speak to communities. We need to speak to our traditional authorities. We need to speak to our community leaders. We need to speak to the church. Unfortunately, the church don't particularly like those ones. They give me a run for my money. But, we have to constantly talk to them because they're part of society. We are all living together here, because it goes back to what you said earlier about the black and white. Because you can litigate, you can lobby at government level, you can have these laws, but they're going to be in paper, black and white. But what's important
is working the ground, working the community. And that is what I hope the queer community in Eswatini will be doing moving forward. I mean, they've been doing a great job so far.
Yeah, most definitely. We are behind them. I think I wanna say whatever support that it is needed, even though it will be in the south, but still, they
Yes.
should request. I think appeal maybe this is not a bad idea. Actually, when
Yeah.
I was preparing, it's like I think they should appeal. I think they should appeal. That
I
I just that I was like, if it's this is the High Court, and then they can go to the Supreme, then they should by all means.
yes. Yes.
They must engage and they must appeal. That has been my thought.
But we should be able, or we should be careful not to be labeled as the, what do they call, the Stalingrad. You know how they say President Zuma does the Stalingrad, just appeal,
Yeah,
appeal, appeal. So we should be
yeah,
careful not to be labeled as those.
yeah. No, I got you as that. I want to. My last question that I have to let you go. I think you have other things to do since it's the morning that side.
Yes.
You have your entire day planned out. But I wanted to say, where to from here? And then well, actually, I think we answered the question of appealing,
Yeah.
which is what I want to wish for the guys in Eswatini to do to
I
take
hope
this
so.
right? But
Yeah.
where to from here? Maybe personally, as Melusi, with the kind of work that you are doing, as an activist, as somebody who has
Right.
been with and in changing and influencing, things in the LGBTQ plus community and outside that.
Mm.
Where to from here? Where are you going?
I mean, the sky's the limit. and
Mm-hmm.
and I always say, we're doing this for all of us, right? It's not about Melusi being in New York or being what, or getting all the accolades for all of the work. I mean, like, I'm talking to you right now about what is going to happen with that registration case. I don't know, because I have not spoken to the people on the ground. I don't know what they're thinking. And I think for me, it's about continuously redoubling our efforts. I love going back to that phrase, redouble our efforts, that famous Mandela code. So we must redouble our efforts to create an enabling environment and an empowering environment, so that, just like the Ilga 2024 conference, which was in Cape Town, we create the space and the platform for queer persons to stand up and speak for themselves. Because we risk ostracizing people if we continuously allow Melusi to speak on issues and speak on behalf of issues. And I do not want that. And I do not think any queer activist wants that. What we want, at least on my side, is to create the platform so that people can come to the table and speak for themselves. I do not know what the queer movement will look like 3 years from now, or even 2 years from now. But what I know for sure is that I will do all I can, and I'll do everything in my power to create an enabling environment and to create platforms for queer persons to come to the table. I mean, just this past March, we were in Johannesburg. The Southern Africa Litigation Center had convened through an Out and Proud project, co-funded by the European Union with support from UNDP and OSISA. We were able to bring activists from across the Southern African region to come up with an advocacy agenda for the region, where they actually came up with a hashtag that says "Queer Without Borders." So this is supposed to be our Black Lives Matter hashtag, "Queer Without Borders." And these are the conversations that came out of that. I mean, we are still going to release a sort of a presser of that, because it's a huge document that came out of that convening from activists. I mean, activists that I've been in the space for so long, but the activists that were in that room were activists who were like, oh, wow. I mean, I didn't know you guys are doing so much in your corner of the world. And it's about coming together and creating those platforms so that these young people, these old people, and these queer persons from whatever, sphere of existence, are able to bring in their ideas and are able to push the conversation forward, because this conversation is not mine and it's not yours. It's for the community to come together. And what you and I are graciously doing here today is creating the space for queer persons to engage and take the conversation forward.
Most definitely, Melusi. I really appreciated your time. Hopefully, we'll see you. 2024 is a long time. Hopefully, something
Yes,
happens before
I
2024 so that we
know.
can bump into each other in person
I
and engage.
know. You
And
never know. You
you
never
know,
know.
you
Exactly.
might. But when you're in South Africa, please, by all means,
Oh,
send
absolutely.
but I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Please enjoy New York. Grasp as much as you can. shine that spotlight, fly that flag as high as you can, and we are definitely we are watching, and we are also, we want to. It needs to, but again, get out of just this a conversation. It needs to be,
Right.
for everybody,
Actionable.
everybody.
Yes, it should be actionable also. Yeah.
I cannot wait. Thank you so much, man, for your time, and have a good morning.
Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me this space. And good afternoon and happy weekend to everyone at home.
Thank you. That is Melusi joining us all the way from New York. Concrete jungle with, I don't know why, made of with this voice. Master Shut. The only thing that I know how to do is to talk. But that was Melusi Simelane, an advocate, and so many other things, joining us from New York, in the United States of America. He's there for work and has been just amazing, for the second time around, speaking about queer issues. And that this platform is for that, where we wrap up the week and look at headlines and get to speak about many other things that are happening in the LGBTQI+ space. Listen, I'm gonna see you next week Monday. On Sunday, if you're shooting something, it's exciting. Be in the lookout for that. Follow us on our social media platforms. It is at @PopIn on Facebook. On Twitter, it is @in_health with the hashtag PopInCares. I'm going to see you on Monday for Clinical Monday, with yet another clinician as we dissect yet another clinical topic. And don't forget, this has been produced solely by a giant, a creative giant. His name is Happy Paling. Who is behind the scenes and making sure that you and I are looking and sounding fabulous. And I'm the host. My name is Ilga, and I'm going to see you when I see you. Until then, happy streaming. Oh, thank you very much for YouTube. Hey, we really, really appreciate it. Click on like, subscribe, and follow our content. Until then, happy streaming. Bye.